What's up, WordPress nerds? In this video, I'm going to be going over Trellis and how to deploy Bedrock sites with it. Pretty much comes out of the box, but I feel like that's a topic that we've been discussing a lot lately, so I figured I'd walk you guys through it. If you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell to make sure you get notified of my weekly WordPress videos. All right, let's jump into it. All right, so what is Trellis? Trellis allows you to set up your local environment and your production environment so that they're the exact same. It creates a virtual machine on your local computer, and then it also takes over your remote environment. In the case of this video, it's going to be a DigitalOcean droplet, and it will set up that DigitalOcean droplet to be the exact same as our local environment, so you get parity. It uses things like Vagrant and Ansible, and it uses Composer and a couple other things that are really nice that you'll want to have set up on your machine, which we will talk about here in a second. But it looks pretty confusing once you start diving into the docs, but I've kind of done the legwork for you, so hopefully I can kind of break this down into something that's a little digestible for you. We're not going to be diving into everything. There's a lot here. And so what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be setting up the necessary pieces to have a local environment and a production environment that will pull from a GitHub repository, and it will be an exact replica of what's on our local machine. So let's jump right into it. So the first things that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to install Vagrant first and foremost. Just go to vagrantup.com/downloads.html. I'll put a link in the description for that. Find your machine type here and download the appropriate file. Next, after that, you're going to download VirtualBox, virtualbox.org/wiki/downloads. Again, link in the description. Find your platform package and go ahead and download that. And then finally, we need to have Composer, which is a PHP dependency manager. And you're just going to want to run this command and then this command so you have access to the Composer on the command line. And then I will put a link into the URL in the description as well. So you want to have those three things ready to go right off the bat. And if you run into any troubles, leave a comment below and we'll help you out. All right, so now that we have that, what we're going to do is we're actually going to start writing some code here. So I'm going to open up my example here. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to remove my old example just so I can start fresh with you guys. So inside of my sites directory, I'm going to create a new folder. Well, I don't know, I couldn't think of that, called Trellis example. And we're going to go into that Trellis example. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to grab the GitHub repository for Trellis. So this is going to have all the files necessary for a Trellis run site. And it's going to do that. And then what we're going to need to do next, without changing directories, we are still in the same directory as Trellis. And we are going to run Composer create project roots/bedrock, and we're going to put that into a site folder. So this is why we need Composer. There's other reasons too, but this is the first one. So what that's going to do is that's going to set up a Bedrock site for us. And if you watched any of my videos, then you know that I love using Bedrock, whether it's through Trellis or otherwise. So hopefully this will kind of get you guys onto the same page and have a quick and easy way to get Bedrock sites set up. So it's going to go ahead and it's going to download WordPress. It's going to download things like Encrypt for us, all sorts of fun things that we would typically expect in a Bedrock site. So let's clear this out and let's open up in Visual Studio Code let's just open up this folder so that way we can see site and Trellis. So what we have here is we have site, and this is just a Bedrock site. So normally if you were just editing this, you would go into web app themes, and then you would have all of your stuff that's right there for your theme. But now we have this extra folder called Trellis. And so we're going to be spending most of our time inside of here because that's where obviously most of the meat lies. So the first thing that we want to do is we probably want to take a look at this group vars folder. So this group vars folder is going to contain the information that is pertinent to each environment. So there's things that are relative to all of them, and then there are folders that are unique to each type of environment: development, production, and staging. So we're just going to be dealing with development and production today. So let's set up our local environment. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to go to all, and then we are going to go to users. And actually, let's not do that. Let's just actually go into our development environment first. And so the things that it's going to have here for us, it's going to have some YAML files that dictate kind of what our site is doing and how it's working, and what, all the things that are enabled and disabled. So PHP has a file, our SMTP stuff, like all that kind of fun stuff is in here. The two that we're going to mainly touch here is vault.yaml and WordPress sites.yaml. So let's start here with WordPress sites.yaml. So what this does is it basically has a list of all the sites that we have locally that we can run out of. And so you would have multiple different entries for each one of your local sites. So what we're going to do is you're going to want to change this from example.com, and we're going to call this trellis.local. So this is what the URL of their site's going to be, and we're going to want to match that over here to the canonical URL. We're just going to get rid of redirects because we don't care if it's www or not locally. This is going to be the path to target our Bedrock site. So over here we go from Trellis into our site, and that's where it's going to look for our WordPress files. We're going to set up our admin email, which is going to be alex@wpcasts.tv. Don't set up my email for that, please. And then we're going to leave SSL false. We're going to leave caching false. We're going to leave multi-site false. We don't care any about that for our local. And that's it for that. So what we're going to do next is we have kind of just have some basic information for that. So we're going to go over to our vault.yaml. And this is where we're going to be setting up passwords and stuff for this local site. And since we have example.com right here, we don't want that. We want trellis.local. Those need to match. It actually says right here, example.com must match with the site in the above file. So WordPress sites.yaml needs to have the same key right here as it does here in vault.yaml. So what we're going to do after that is we're going to set up a couple passwords here. I've just pre-generated some of these to save a little bit of time for us. And we're going to set up our passwords to be as such. So just make sure that they're secure passwords. If you have any special characters in them, just wrap them in quotes. I don't have any special characters in here, so there's no quotes there. So after that, what we need to do is we need to run Vagrant up. So let's take a look at how that's going to work. So let's go to Hyper. And we need to go inside of our Trellis site. So let's go to Trellis and run Vagrant up. So if you have this installed, what it's going to do is it's going to create a virtual machine for us. And it's going to be based off of Ubuntu 18.04, which we will also set up in DigitalOcean in a minute. But this actually takes quite some time to spin up. So if yours is taking a long time when you get to this step, do not worry. This is 100% normal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video and we'll come back when it's all done. All right, so if you did that on your own, then that was a good 5 to 10 minutes. But now that it's done, we should be able to navigate to trellis.local, and we should have a working site here. So that is, in a nutshell, how you get a development server up and running with Trellis. And it's all run by, it's got the whole Bedrock backbone to it. So what we're going to do next is we want to be able to do our production stuff. So if we want to be able to deploy something to a DigitalOcean droplet, which we'll set up here in a second, there's going to be a few things that we need to do. So let's open back up our code and let's take a look. So now that we have our development stuff done, let's just go ahead and click out of that. And production, we're going to have our vault, and we are going to change that up to something new. So what we have is we're going to set our MySQL root password to something unique. We're also going to set the password for the vault users to be something unique as well. The salt is going to be something unique as well. And then down here, we have our site as well. We have our example.com that we need to take care of. So we're going to go ahead and change first and foremost, if I can copy that, we're going to just change this to, it can't be trellis.local. It's going to have to be something that is actually visitable, and it can't be an IP address. Make sure that when you're doing this, you have the domain set up already. You have the DNS records all where they need to be and all that. So trellis.wpcast.tv. So it could be a subdomain like this, and that's what we're going to do. So then we have our DB password, which I got set up, and then they have this nice little website you can go to generate all of these salts, which we will actually just go ahead and do. So you guys can check it out. It's nice. It's got it for the NV format and for YAML format for Trellis. So let's just go ahead and toss those in there and line them back up. All nice and pretty, or else it won't work. And there we go. Now we have that all good. So next we need to be able to change the WordPress sites.yaml here. And again, we're going to change all of this and this to trellis.wpcast.tv. And we're going to remove that redirect. I don't give a care about that. And then it's going to ask for a repository. So one important thing to note here is that all of your code is going to be hosted somewhere. And then when you are ready to deploy your local changes, you're going to want to push up your changes to GitHub, and then you're going to want to run a deploy script. And what that's going to do is that's going to go to your server. It's going to log in via SSH, and it's going to clone in that repository from GitHub or wherever into your production server. And that's how changes are being made. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up this repository in just 1 second. But what I want to do first is just set a couple other parameters. We're going to be setting SSL to true, and that's all you have to do for SSL. So real easy there. And then caching is going to be enabled to true. And so memmed cache is going to get turned on, and then we should be good to go. The other thing that we should do before we set up this repository, so I'm making a mental note here that we don't forget this, but we have a couple things here that are no good. We have a repository about to have a repository that's going to have all this fun stuff inside of there. We're going to be creating a private repository, so it won't matter as much, but I still feel uncomfortable with the fact that we're going to be submitting these passwords and all that to a repository. And so what Trellis actually recommends is that you use Ansible Vault to encrypt all of these passwords. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow what they say on their website, and we're going to create something that is not tracked in Git, but is essentially a key to help decrypt what these passwords mean. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a new file inside of Trellis, and we're going to call this vault_pass. And this is actually get ignored by default inside of Trellis. So you don't actually have to ignore this. It automatically has it for you. So what we're going to do inside of there is all you need to do is give it a string, just like kind of like a password like I've created for all the other things. And this is going to act as the key to help Ansible decrypt those vault passwords that we have. So what we need to do is we need to tell Ansible about this, and we're going to open up in the ansible.config inside of the defaults section here. We're going to put it right under vars plugins, and we're going to say the vault password file is vault pass. And then lastly, it's going to want us to run an encrypt script. So what that's going to look like is if we open up our hyper terminal and we clear this out, it's going to be Ansible. what is it? Ansible-vault, and then it's going to be encrypt. And then you give it a path to all the files that need to be encrypted. So that's going to be, if we open this back up, it's going to be the group vars. It's going to be inside of all. It's going to be the vault.yaml. It's going to be inside of development, the vault.yaml, and the production vault.yaml. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste this in here for us so we don't have to watch me type out those paths, but you will give it a path to each one of those files. So Ansible Vault encrypt on the all, the development, and the production vaults. So we're going to go ahead and run that, and then the encryption is going to be successful here. And what does that do? So if we were to reopen up these files, let's open up the production one and look at our vault.yaml. It looks like a bunch of garbage, which is exactly what we want it to be. Inside of the documentation, there's a way to decrypt this if you for some reason need to get access to those passwords again. So don't worry too much about that right now. But what we're going to do is I just wanted to get this done before we actually committed any of this to a private repository. So what we're going to do next is we're going to actually create that repository. So I need to open up GitHub here, and I'm going to create a new repository, and it's going to be Trellis example, and it's going to be a private repository. So let's create that. And let's copy this git remote here. And we're going to go back to this guy. And so let's go back to our main directory where we have our site and Trellis here. And let's do git init. And so now we should have a lot of stuff ready to go for us to be committed to the repository. So that's everything that we need for our sites. Next, let's just do a quick status check. So we're going to add everything, and we're going to commit it, commit-m, initial commit, because, and then we're going to set up our remote repository. So git remote add, and then we're going to add in that repository. Quick side note, I have some fun stuff going on with my SSH keys. And so what you're about to watch me do is not something that you have to do, but I'm changing github.com to github-personal. And all this is because I'm juggling a bunch of SSH keys, and I'm changing which SSH key I use by adding that -personal on there. So adding that, and then I'm getting git push origin -u origin, I think, -u origin master. So now that we have that up there, let's double check, make sure we're all good. And so if we check in our Trellis, we don't have that vault pass. And if we check in our group vars and we check, let's use this vault. Oh, we got our nastiness, which is exactly what we wanted. So good job there. So now that we have this set up, let us set up the rest of our DigitalOcean droplet and then actually deploy this code. So let's move on to that. All right, so next we're moving on to creating our DigitalOcean droplet, and this is going to be our production server. So we're going to create a new Ubuntu image here at 18.04. It needs to be specifically that because that's what's supported by Trellis. And then we're going to select the smallest guy here, and then we're going to pick San Francisco because that's closest to me. And then we're going to select all of my SSH keys. If you don't have SSH keys set up, just click new SSH key, follow the prompts, and set one up for yourself. I promise you it'll make your life a lot easier. And then we're setting up something of a host name for our droplet. I just call this example. And then that would be it. You just create this droplet. However, I've already created one ahead of time. Reason being is that this IP address is what I needed because I have my DNS to already point to this for trellis.wpcast.tv, and I didn't want to have to wait for the DNS to propagate. So it's a blank droplet. It's being set up with just the same settings that we had right now, and just what we were just looking at. So what we're going to do next is we need to tell Trellis about this, and we need to tell Trellis about any SSH keys that we have. After that, we're going to install Ansible, and then we will finally be able to actually deploy our site to this droplet. So let's start in the code. And what we're going to do is we're first and foremost going to be going to our host folder. And what we're going to do is we're going to open up the production hosts file. And what this needs is that droplet information that we just created. So let's open back up DigitalOcean, and we are going to grab that IP address. And so we're going to paste that here, and we're going to paste that here. And that just tells Trellis that that's the server that we're going to be deploying to. And then after that, we need to just do something really quick with under group vars all, and then users.yml. And we're just going to be telling Trellis about any SSH keys that we have, because now we're kind of starting to ramp up into needing to deploy. So I personally don't use ID RSA for this kind of stuff. I have another key that I use that I've just named ID RSA personal. Yours will most likely just be ID RSA just as is. And then if you're using GitHub as well, we're going to want to uncomment these and change it to your GitHub username. And mine is Alexander-Young. And what this file basically does is it creates two users, web and admin. Admin is for all your server admin needs, and then web is going to be what Trellis logs in as to clone in your repository and all that good stuff. So we need to give it proper access to our GitHub repository. And so what we're going to actually do is once we set up this server is we're going to use GitHub deploy keys to kind of do that. And that's just my preferred method. I find it easier and a little bit more safe. So what we're going to do next is we're actually going to provision this server. So what that means is we're going to be running a special command on there, which I have pulled up. So let me just open up Hyper again, and let's just get this back to where we need to be. Whoops. Close that. A little behind the scenes action here. So dev size Trellis example, and then inside of Trellis, we have all of our good stuff in here. And so what we need to do first is we need to run a couple different little commands that will install the necessary programs to deploy our stuff. Like I said in previous bits, Trellis uses Ansible to kind of manage our server and run tasks on the server and all that kind of stuff. So we need to install that. Don't need to do that with your local development, it's already taken care of for us, but for actually deploying our server, we need it. So this is the command that you're going to need to run. Let's clear that, put it up at top. pip install-r requirements.txt. And so requirements.txt, if we were to open this up, is installing Ansible and passlib. So we want those on our computer. So we're going to be installing that with this. And once that's done installing, we're going to run Ansible. And we're going to install some of the things that Ansible needs. So Ansible Galaxy install-r galaxy.yml. And this is just going to install dependencies that Ansible has inside of it that we care about. So we're going to, what was it? It was galaxy.yml. And so just all sorts of fun little things inside of here that it just needs to work. Don't really need to worry about explaining that too much. All we care about is that once those two things are done, we're actually going to be able to provision our server. And so what does provision mean? So when we run Ansible playbook and then pass it server.yml and give it the environment of production, what that's going to do is it's going to take a look at our server.yml here at the root, and it's going to run these tasks that will kind of create the server architecture that we need for our WordPress site. So it's going to install things like MariaDB, PHP, Nginx, Composer, Let's Encrypt, all that kind of stuff that we need in order for our site to work. And so that's going to it's going to SSH into our droplet because we gave it that IP address and our SSH stuff. And then it's going to run those tasks and install all that stuff onto our blank Ubuntu server. So we're going to run that. I'm going to pause the video and then we're going to come back when that's all done. All right, that took a minute, but we should now have a server up and running. However, all that is that has created the architecture of our server. That doesn't have our website on it yet. So what we need to do is we need to set up a couple things in order for it to actually be able to deploy. So let's actually start off by going into our site, and we're going to create an SSH key on there. We're going to give it to GitHub, and then we're going to be able to run our deploy script. So let's do that. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go into GitHub first and foremost, and we're going to go to our Trellis example repository. We're going to click on settings, and we are going to go to deploy keys. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set up a special SSH key on our DigitalOcean droplet. We're going to take that information, that key, and we're going to give it to GitHub. And so when, Trellis is like, all right, I need to pull in this information, it's going to use this deploy key. That way we're not passing along like our personal keys around and all that kind of stuff. It's a key that is read-only access to that specific GitHub repository. It doesn't have access to anything else. So if the server's ever compromised, the most it can do is clone in that repository. So no big deal. So we're going to add new deploy key. We're going to call this production key, I guess. And what we're going to do is we're going to go now into our server, and we're going to SSH using web as our user, which we created in Trellis. And what we're going to do with that is we are then going to run SSH Keygen. And there's documentation on this, but it's SSH Keygen -T RSA-B 4096 C, and then you give it your email address. And so that's going to generate a key when we're just going to leave it as ID RSA because that's what it's going to go for by default, no password. And then it's going to give us this lovely stuff here. And so what we're going to do is we are going to grab this. So we're going to clear this out, and we're going to do cat and then space in home web SSH ID RSA.pub. And we're going to copy everything that it spits out here, and we're going to add that right to our deploy key text area. So you can give it write access. I'm not giving it write access. We're just going to click add key. So now we have on our production server, we have an SSH key, and it now knows about that key on GitHub. All right, so without further ado, let's jump into the actual deploy. All right, so let's actually deploy this bad boy. So from the Trellis directory, we're going to be running /bin deploy.sh, and then we're going to give it which environment we want to deploy and what site we want to deploy. So let's just hit that, and what that should be doing is kind of like the rest of it. It's not going to take nearly as long, but it is going to go out to our GitHub. It's going to grab all of our files, and it's going to toss them onto the server. So once this is done, we'll come back and we can take a look at it together. All right, you guys are in trouble. You forgot to remind me to go back and change the GitHub repository. I thought we had this good thing going between us all and you had my back, but actions speak louder than words. So we got to go back. We got to go to WordPress sites under group vars and then production WordPress sites. We need to change this. It can't clone example.com. Goodness gracious. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to GitHub. I have that over here. All right, so we're going to our code, and we're going to grab this URL, and that's where we're going to paste it. Goodness gracious. All right, now we can run that command and get things back on track. Now I'll pause the video and hopefully we'll have a good deploy. All right, that's looking much better. So let's go back to trellis.wpcast.tv and refresh, and voila, we now have a WordPress site up and running on there. So all we did was spin up a new droplet, run a few commands, and then there we go. Let's just do this real quick. This will be down by the time you guys see this, so no use getting rid of that. But if I keep forgetting things like I've done tonight, then maybe not. So have at it, fellas. So we've got a WordPress site here going. We've got 2020 going. So now let's actually kind of use Bedrock to change this. So let's jump back to our code. All right, so now that we're back in our code, let's go into our site and take a look at the composer.json. Inside of our requires here, we have a couple of must-use plugins. We have WordPress, we have all that good stuff. However, we don't have any regular plugins. So let's double check that. So we're going to plugins, not themes, plugins. Yeah, we don't have any plugins here. So what we're going to do is we're going to install a plugin. And what we need to do is if we go to, let's just back out, cd Trellis example. So we have our site and Trellis folders. We're going to go into site, and we have our composer.json here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to composer require wpackagist plugin / duplicate post. And if you're unfamiliar with wpackagist, it's just kind of a mirror of the plugin repository that WordPress has. So it's going to download that into our file system right here. So if we go to web app plugins, if we refresh this, we now have duplicate post. And so what we want to do is we want to take that from our local copy all the way up to production. And so we're just going to commit our composer and composer lock files. So let's stage those. We're on the wrong thing here. So it's Trellis example. So let's stage those two files and adds duplicate post plugin. And then let's just git push origin master. And so creating that up there in GitHub is not going to do anything until we actually deploy it. But let's double check that in our site, we have our composer JSON that now has duplicate post in there. Hopefully you guys can see that now. So we want duplicate post. And so now we need to rerun that deploy script. So that's going to be we need to go back to our Trellis directory. And we need to do /bin/deploy.sh production trellis.wpcast.tv. And I'm sure you can make some shortcuts to make this a little bit easier. Again, I'm going to just pause it real quick, let it do its thing, and then we'll double check our site. All right, so now that that's good to go, let's double check our live site here. So if we go to plugins again, we now have duplicate posts. And so now we should be able to go into posts, and now we can clone it into something new. So we now have an exact copy of our local onto our production. And I know that it was a lot of setup, but once you got it going, like you just push stuff up to your repository and then you run a single command to deploy it to your site, and it's zero downtime. There's really nothing that you got to do. It honestly saves a lot of time once you get it up and running. So hopefully this helped you out. I spent some time figuring it out to kind of distill it into something that was hopefully pretty digestible to you guys. So if you liked the video, definitely give it a thumbs up. Leave me a comment. I read every single comment, and I thank you guys all for the kind words that you've given me. But yeah, I hope that you guys like this. If you are new, make sure to subscribe. I do videos like this all the time. And leave a comment letting me know what would you like me to cover next. I'd like to thank my patrons. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for the support. And I promise that as soon as we hit one of those goals on Patreon, then we'll start doing exclusive videos there every now and again. We're on our way. I mean, already 6 people, so really happy with that. But anyway, thanks guys. I'll keep this short. I will see you guys in the next one.